Okay, so here we go. So like I said before, it's important that during this process you are just writing down ideas, okay? Just whatever pops into your head, that's what you're going to write down. Don't worry about editing, don't worry about processing, just write it down, okay? So here we go. So the first thing that I would like for you to consider, think about who you are, what you believe in, some of your values, some of the things in your life that you hold very dear. Okay? Do you have a story? Do you have a time that taught you that lesson? Now, some of you may not, okay? And that's fine. But if you do have that, you might go ahead and write that down. Maybe you'll be one of those lucky few who have a very defining moment in your life that taught you a lesson. If so, write it down. That may be a good place to start. For the rest of us, like if you were to ask me that question, I don't know that I would instantly come up with something. So here's some of the things that we want to talk about. Let's start first with travel. Okay, trips that you've taken. Anytime that we travel, anytime that we go somewhere new, we see something new, sometimes we learn something, right? We learn something about ourselves, we learn something about the people around us. So, write down every single trip you've ever taken, right? Whether it's a family vacation, whether it's some kind of a school event, like you went on a band trip, something like that. But it could be something simple, right? It could be just going to visit Grandma and Grandpa if they live someplace else. So I'll give you a second. So write down all the trips you've been on. Okay? And again, I'm just going to pause so you guys can write. That's what we're doing. Okay, another typical event in people's lives that teaches them a lesson are injuries, right? First broken bone. Write it down. Some kind of an illness, right? Sometime when you were sick, that was pretty traumatic or that was pretty serious. Just write it down. Don't worry about the lesson right now. Just write down a time that you were sick, the time that you were injured. Some of you may have a longer list than others, right? And I've put up here on the board, I guess I should have said this at the beginning. I've put up here on the board, this is my brainstorm. After the video's over, they're going to pull the screen up and let you just kind of see my list too. I know you can't see it probably on the screen. But so some of my trips, like in 1999, I went to England, Ireland, Scotland. I've been to Africa, been to Australia, we've gone to Colorado several times. I have Texas, South Dakota, Tennessee, New York. Okay, so these are some of the places I've been. As far as injuries go, so I had a bone spur in my foot. One time I had a really bad migraine that put me in the hospital. I did walk on fire. My cousin Alan hit me in the head with a rock. I have some other things, like my son broke his arm twice. My wife, she had a horse accident. When I was a kid, I cut my hand with my pocket knife. Right? Okay? So next up, let's talk about firsts, right? The first time, it's kind of like the trip. The first time you experience something, a lot of times there's a lesson there. So, so let's start easy. First day of school. I don't know if you remember your first day of school in kindergarten, but it could be any of your first days of school, right? You have now had 10 first days of school, kindergarten through 9th grade. So maybe one of those, there was something that happened that first day of school, your first day in the high school. Some of you have moved, right? Some of you have started a new school later on in your educational career. So maybe you want to talk about that. Okay? First day of school. Other things, other firsts. So like your first bicycle. Like, do you remember learning how to ride your bike? Some of you may be getting close to the age, whether legally or illegally, where you have started to, mom or dad have taken you out and you've started to learn how to drive. Okay? Some of you have experienced that earlier. First four-wheeler, first time hunting, first time playing a sport, first time making the team, first time you picked up your band instrument. Firsts. Maybe some relationship things, right? So, like the first time you met your best friend. I know from personal experience, my best friends, we didn't hit it off right at the beginning, right? The first time I met a lot of the people who were to be my best friends, it took us a while. We didn't like each other at first, and then over time we grew to like each other. So that would be a good story, right? So some of those relationship things. Right, so I have this one about Doug, this one about Stefan. Okay. How about romance, right? No, this isn't awkward. Your first kiss. Your first boyfriend or girlfriend. Now for some of you, your first boyfriend or girlfriend was kindergarten, right? So however you want to deal with that, but that might be something you want to write down. Your first dance. Your first crush. For some of you, your first date. Now, let me say this right now because some of you are getting kind of nervous maybe. No one else is going to see this list. Okay, so this list is just for you. This is just your brainstorm list, unless you show it to people. Okay, so think about firsts. Let's talk about losses. When we lose, we learn lessons. So let's talk about failures, right? So you're on the team, your team loses. You thought you were going to do well and you lose. Maybe you thought you were going to do really well at this thing, whether it's a test, a class, okay? But a time that you lost, a time that you failed, right? Failure is a great teacher. So sometime whenever you tried something and you failed miserably, there are good lessons in failure. I think it's also important that we can later on kind of laugh at our failures too a little bit. So maybe you lost something, right? Maybe there was an object that was important to you. I know that in our community this past year, many people lost things, right? So maybe there's something that you possessed that you lost, that was taken from you, that was destroyed. What did you learn from that experience? Maybe pets, right? I know several of you, I know that in our household, our dog is part of the family, right? So if you lost a pet, sometimes that can be a lesson. Friendships. We talked earlier about the first time you met your friend. You know, it's part of life. You have these people in your lives, they're your friends, and then they move out of our lives. Whether they move away, or whether something happens and there's a conflict and you're no longer friends. Okay? Again, there's always a lesson to be learned there, so you might think about friendships. Divorce. Right? You lost something. You lost what you had. So that might be something that you want to that you want to deal with as well. Again, I would write it down. You don't have to talk about it. You don't have to write about it. But it's a possible topic. Something to consider. And finally, death, right? You're young. You possibly haven't had a lot of people in your life die yet. But it does happen, and it's going to happen. And so those losses of loved ones can teach us lessons too. Again, you may not want to talk about it. Okay. All right, so that was kind of a downer. Let's talk about victories, right? Things in which you succeeded. These are also really good lessons. A lot of times victories come through perseverance, determination, hard work. A lot of times victories come after losses, right? So I have up here on my board, I started running a couple years ago. I do these endurance obstacle runs. The first one I did was horrendous, right? I thought I was going to die. I was poorly prepared. I was not ready to do this thing. And then the next year, it ticked me off so badly that I did so poorly that it pushed me to succeed. And I did a whole lot better the second time around and the third time around. So maybe looking at those types of stories. Have you had a victory, especially after a loss? Whether it's in sports, whether it's in academics, right? Whether there's just some personal goal that you set for yourself that you met. Okay, so if you guys need a couple more minutes to write, you can go ahead and pause the video here for a second, and you can write, and then we'll do some filtering. So you can pause me if you want to. Okay, so now I need to do some filtering. Okay, as I said, I have this list. This just came out of my head. And the first thing I need to do is I need to eliminate things that I can't talk about. I might not be able to talk about them for a couple of reasons. One, and this is really important, guys, you have to listen to me. Okay? Don't forget where you are, who you are, and who is listening. These stories will be read by everybody in the class. You will share them out loud with your class. You're going to read these to the class. All right? And listen to me. Your stories need to be about you, and if your story shares something about another person that is negative, you need to seriously consider whether or not that's appropriate for this setting. Okay? If you're writing one of these stories about losing a friendship, and that friend is in this classroom or is in this school, and you want to talk about what a jerk they are, forget about it. Okay? So that's one. Just general appropriateness, right? Don't forget where you are, who I am, who we need to be here, right? So these stories must be classroom appropriate. Again, very rarely does this happen, but you just want to make sure that it would be okay to share with the class. My rule of thumb, with anything that we share with people, if you have a question about whether it's appropriate or not, then you already answered your question. If you wonder, is this right, is this appropriate, then it's not, right? So that's just a good rule of thumb. Third would just be if it's too personal, right? You are going to have to stand up here and read your story to the class. Can you do that without crying? Can you do that without becoming an emotional wreck? If it's hard for you, you probably need to write about something else. Okay? So I'm going to go through my list here real quickly. And again, I know you can't see everything that's up here, but again, hopefully we can raise the screen in a little bit. You can see which ones I mark out. But there are going to be some of these that I'm going to mark out, and I'll kind of talk to you about them. So what's something I can't talk about? My wife's horse accident. She's fine. But that day, I just can't talk about it. right? I become an emotional wreck. So I'm going to mark out Rachel's horse next. This story, Aubrey's heart. Again, this is my daughter. She's fine. She's great. But before she was born, there was a concern about her health. And again, I just reliving that, I'm just a hot mess. And so I'm going to take that one out just because I can't handle it, right? I'm going to take Stefan off the list. Because one, I mean, you guys don't know Stefan, okay? In fact, that's not even his real name. But I just don't feel like it would be appropriate for me to talk about this story. That, and I'll be real honest, I'm just really ashamed of the way I behaved in that situation. So I'm going to self-edit. I'm just going to take that one off the table. Okay? So take a moment and cross through anything that you don't think you can deal with, anything you can't talk about, anything you shouldn't talk about, anything you just flat out don't want to talk about. So I'll give you just a moment for that. Again, if you need to pause me, you can pause me. Okay, so now our next step is we need to find possible themes. Now this is the hard part. I don't expect you to be able to finish this part right now. Okay, I'm going to model it for you. I'm going to show you what I did, and then we'll stop the tape, and you guys will just kind of get done what you can get done. But understand that you may need to continue this brainstorming process on your own later on. Okay, don't assume that you're just done. You may be. Okay, so I'm just going to start over here at the top. And I'm going to walk you through some of these. Whenever they lift the screen. So my topics are in black. I crossed out things in green that I'm not going to talk about. And then in red, off to the side, I wrote down possible themes. Okay? So honestly, with this England, Ireland, Scotland one, I don't have any lessons. Right? It was a great trip. It was fun. It was exciting. I didn't learn squat. Okay? When I was in Africa, we visited this family, and they honored us by giving us this tea, and it was awful. It was horrendous. But through that, I understood that, for them this was a great gift. It cost a lot of money. So there may be a lesson there that I can do with other people's values. This summer, my dad, my son, and I, we took this long bike ride to the mountains. I was concerned about my son not making it. My dad and I both about had heart attacks, but Carter, he didn't stop biking the entire time. So some lesson there about age and expectations of, age. Some of these, I just don't, like this one, the Tennessee trip. When I was a little kid, we took this trip through Tennessee, and we all got car sick. And we had these spaceman helmets, and we all ended up puking in our spaceman helmets. It's a great story. It's disgusting, but I don't really have a lesson there, except for maybe always bring a helmet. So with my migraine, I was in the hospital for a while, and I was teaching at that time, and so I learned that I need to always be prepared. Okay. With the story about my cousin hitting me in the head with rocks, there's maybe a lesson there about forgiveness. We built a treehouse with my kids, and so I learned that it's okay if things aren't always perfect, messes are fine, right? So when I cut my hand as a little kid, so I wasn't supposed to be playing with a pocket knife, I cut my hand, and then instead of telling my mom about it, I hid it, right, from her because I knew I'd be in trouble, and it got infected, right? So I would have been better off just telling the truth, okay? This story about Doug, best friend. So I was like 9 or 10, and my friend Doug, who was my best friend, he point blank asked me, who's your best friend? And I chickened out, and I said, because I was afraid to put myself out there. And so I said, this other kid, I said, Ross is my best friend. And he said, oh, well, you're my best friend. Right? He put himself out there, but I failed to do so. So just being honest in relationships, that's a good one. I already talked about the running thing. This summer, we butchered our chickens. That's horrendous. And I learned that there are things that I can't do. Okay? I also learned that I romanticize some things that are not realistic and yada yada yada. Okay, so there are more of those. So what I want you to do is I want you to go through and I want you to just, off to the side of each of those stories, if you can come up with a theme or a lesson you learn, write it off to the side. Obviously, once you're done with that, if there are things that you don't have a theme for, then those stories go away. Right? I can only write stories about those things that I have a theme next to. Alright, so you're going to do that. Don't forget tomorrow you need to, or Monday you need to have your story topic in writing on a piece of paper, and you need to have your lesson in writing on the same piece of paper. Okay, that is due Monday. Alright, come see me if you have any problems. Good luck.